are spending 22 minutes today with none other than Shawn Michaels. So great to have you here.
Thank you very much.
We have a packed house today.
22 minutes with me is going to be a long time.
No, I promise it'll go back and it'll go by in a flash. You are starring in a new movie called The Resurrection of Gavin Stone, and I was telling you before we started the interview, it's a really, really sweet movie. Tell us a little bit about what it's about.
Well, it's about a former child star who's sort of washed up and still getting into trouble, which is a little true to life there. But he has to do community service, and he's doing everything he can to get out of it. He picks the easiest venue, which to him is helping out, doing 200 hours of community service at a church. And even while he's in the church doing that, he then tries to finagle his way into being a part of the church play. He's doing everything he can to get out of having to do any work. And in that process, he goes through somewhat of a change, obviously, it's what they call an inspirational romantic comedy, but really it is about a group of people, loving and accepting and appreciating someone just, with all their faults and everything else. And in this process of him playing the role of Jesus in the Easter pageant, between playing that role and being around these people that are so accepting of him, this unbelievably selfish character goes through a real change, and clearly a very positive change.
Right, a resurrection. And it's also a rom-com, too. There's a nice little romance.
There is. There's a little romance in it and a great deal of comedy. And honestly, look, I'm a church guy, but I appreciate the comedy because there's a lot to make fun of sometimes. I can remember growing up Catholic and then going into a more Christian-based church and seeing them like, oh, you're doing all, and it freaked me out at first, and Gavin, we poke fun at all that, and I appreciate that. I hope that our pious church folks will understand that, but it really is it's a great deal of fun, and behind that a very touching and warm message.
Yeah, the jokes are very, very gentle about that. And your character is Doug. You play one of the disciples in the play that they're putting on. And you're also a mechanic. How did you get the part as Doug?
Well, Doug is a reformed convict. Doug is a guy that had a very troubled past. The church helped change his, between his family and the church, it changed his life. It turned him into a man of more wanting to serve. And of course, Dallas Jenkins, the director of the film, knows my real life story. And me and Doug are very similar in that respect. Now, I didn't do any time, but I lived a pretty rough life at one time, and there were a lot of comparisons between Doug and myself. And as I said, Dallas knew about my past, and he felt that I would be a really good fit for Doug, and it was a phenomenal opportunity. I had a great deal of fun doing it, and I have to. Brett Dalton, who plays the lead role of Gavin.
Right. From Agents
of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
The dastardly, Grant Ward from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He was he's a big Hollywood star, and he was so unbelievably helpful, so gracious, and they couldn't have been, this is my first movie, and it's a role where I don't do anything tough. I don't beat anybody up. I don't throw any punches. There's no action adventure to it. It was
although you catch Jesus in one scene,
and of course, and the stuntman does that. The one role that I could actually was in my wheelhouse. I'm not allowed to do.
I just assumed that with your background.
It's funny I guess because of SAG rules and things of that nature.
Okay, all right.
They have to have a real life stunt person to do that, and we all had a great deal of fun with that. The one thing that I knew that I could do, I was not allowed to do. So, Brett was just fantastic and incredibly helpful. Dallas was helpful. The entire cast and crew. And for me, for your first time, I couldn't have had a better opportunity with wonderful people.
Yeah. Did you go to the other actors also? D.B. Sweeney and the guy from Scrubs.
Flynn,
Neil
yes,
Flynn plays your
yes.
dad.
Yes.
Plays the dad of Gavin.
Of Gavin,
right,
yes.
right. So would you go to those guys and say, I'm kind of a rookie here. Can you give me some
Well,
pointers?
I was very upfront with everybody. I said, look, I don't know what I'm doing. But most of my scenes were with Gavin Stone. We're with Brett.
Right.
And obviously the other actors. And I did know, I was very open and honest to everybody. And I said, look, any help you can give me, any tips.
Yeah.
And they were just fantastic. And the thing is, when they're that welcoming, I again, as I think I'm sort of learning, the most important thing is to have a real comfort level. And the closer that you guys can bond, sort of in real life, I think the more chemistry you have on screen. And that was certainly something that they made it very easy to do because they were fantastic.
You mentioned that there are parallels with your own personal story and the story of Doug and the story of Gavin, too,
Yes.
in a sense. And you were really, really open about that in an autobiography. So what changed in your life from your, I don't know, bad boy days to where you are now?
Well, first and foremost, the love of a good woman started it out. My wife, and then having our first child. It caused me to look at myself in the mirror one day and go, you know what, you are not really. You might have success in this field, but when it comes to being a husband and a father, you're not very good at it. And honestly, without getting too deep and melodramatic, it was the first time when I realized that, I loved something more than my own selfish desires, and that was my children and my wife. And making a change for them was, when it comes to that deep of a love, it was easy for me to do. And of course, then one day, I walked into Cornerstone Church and I said, look, somebody give me some help here. I just know I need to make a change, but I don't really know how to go about doing it. And from that point on, I've just never gone back to that crazy lifestyle, and I've lived an extremely blessed and fortunate life from that point on.
Now, about the wrestling.
Yes.
Got to talk about it. Yeah, these guys are going to throw me around the studio if I don't ask them. Don't ask some questions. So you still get the chant, right?
Yeah.
One more. Match.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I get that going here? Can I?
One more match.
Here we go.
What do you think when you hear that?
It's very flattering. One of the things, I believe the most important thing in entertainment is to always leave them wanting more. And I feel like I did that. In our line of work in wrestling, it always seemed to me that, again, everybody was like, well, you can still do it. Why, you went out on top. Why, well, you've still got more in you. Why wouldn't you go out there and do it? And only in the wrestling business does it seem sort of strange for everybody to, why would you not save, all of that for something else? You know what I mean? And again, I loved all my years in the WWE.
Physically, could you still? I don't mean to interrupt. Physically, could you still do it?
Sure.
You feel like you're still in that kind of shape.
Strangely enough, I'm probably in better shape now at 51 than I was when I retired at 44 or 45.
Because?
Well, time, rest. I'm there to control my diet. Much harder to do on the road. And also, I've learned, age is a great teacher. You learn a lot of wisdom as you get older. I look back and I think to myself, boy, you got by on a lot of natural ability and natural genetics. And when you're younger and busy like that on the road, you don't have to watch your diet as much. You can get by with a lot more.
Yeah.
When you get past 40 and 50, you have to tighten it up a little bit. And it is much easier to do at home in a sterile environment, going to the gym every day, controlling your workouts, training with somebody. Right. Those are things I never really did. I still trained, I still dieted somewhat, but not to the point that I do when I'm at home and I can have ultimate control over it. You can't do that with a 150 day a year schedule on the road. It's a little bit more difficult, or it was for me.
But you wouldn't want to go back. You wouldn't want to do that one more match.
No, you know what? I mean, again, I enjoyed what I did. Honestly, it's sort of like, do you want to climb that same mountain? And again, I'm thankful, I'm appreciative, but and in the wrestling business, they're sort of, and I don't mean it to be mean, but everybody's sort of obsessed with the past. And I'm too busy looking to the future.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited about new things, new endeavors. And honestly, again, I went home to help my wife raise our children, and they're still there, so I'm not done yet.
Right, and yet people are still, when you Google Shawn Michaels, one of the first things that comes up is a WWE Royal Rumble. I guess that's happening in a few weeks.
Yep.
It's in your hometown, San Antonio.
It is, yep.
The speculation's been crazy. Any involvement there?
Yeah, well, no, and it's funny. About 2 weeks ago, I was doing press, and I said, "Look, nobody's even contacted me about it." And they hadn't. Everybody's like, "No, come on, don't be coy." And no
for
one
real,
had,
nobody even
no,
reached
no
out.
one has. I was just at Raw, and I can announce I'm going to go there, but I'm doing the panel. I'm gonna do something during the show. But and one of the things I don't think people understand, they always think there's a hidden message. One of the things with me in the WWE is I've been doing it. You do this stuff for 30 years. They don't really need to call me 2 weeks in advance and get me ready to do something. All you really have to do is call me and then tell me that day, and I like to think I can pretty much figure out how to do it. Yeah. So so I will say I'm never trying to be coy or hold anything back. Honestly, we don't ever talk for the most part unless they call and want me to do something, and they're too busy trying to get the Royal Rumble set. I think they knew well in advance that it was, they know it's in San Antonio. They know that, well, at some point, I'm sure we'll give Shawn a call and do something. But that's not anything that's really high up on their priority list. The people in charge, Vince McMahon and Hunter, I mean, they're the two people that, and Vince is the guy I retired to. He knows that, he doesn't entertain any of the whole, Shawn, one more match things. He already knows. It. Yeah, he already knows what the answer is. So, and again, I'm not trying to, rain on anybody's parade or kill any speculation, but those things never reach that high up in the chain because he and I don't ever talk about that because it's a non-issue.
Non-starter.
Yeah.
How about the new generation of wrestlers? Is there somebody that you watch now and you say, that guy reminds me of me back in the day?
Well, I tell you, there are a number of guys that. Honestly, the most flattering thing is that, much like Flair and Blanchard and Wahoo and the Funks, and the Von Erichs, all those guys that I watched and influenced me, sort of neat, I'm sort of that guy, or one of those guys to this younger generation. Right. And to me, that's very flattering. And so, again, there are a number of guys, Seth and AJ and all those guys are, there's a number of, Finn Balor, I mean, there's a number of guys that are very talented. I think the wrestling business, the WWE, is in great hands for the future. And honestly, the guys before me, they weren't real. The generation before me that I looked up to, they weren't real gracious about stepping aside and letting the young guys go. I'm good with that. It is a young man's line of work. Yeah. And just like basketball, the NBA had to get past Michael Jordan. LeBron came along, and there you go. And wrestling is the same thing. It's going to continue to go without Shawn Michaels and the Ric Flairs and the Triple H's and the Undertakers. I mean, it's hard to let go, but at the same time, it will go on, and those guys will become the stars of today, and I think that's cool. And look, I think it helps to accept that stuff when you have other priorities and stuff like that. At some point in my life, those priorities shifted.
Right, and yet I understand that sometimes the old guard will criticize the new guard. What do you think when you hear that?
Well, you know what? They did it to me, and so that's the thing. Again, I tell them I'm not going to do that. They told me the same thing. You're doing it wrong. It's too fast. Do this. And look, there was a great deal of validity in what the old timers were saying, but you've got to figure it out for yourself. You can tell them all day long. Experience is the best teacher, and time. And the thing is. You do your best to help and to mold and to shape. I can remember Savage telling me, slow down. And I said, I'm not slowing down. You just can't keep up. And then about 10 years later, I said, you know what? I think I need to slow down. and I tell them the same thing. I tell them that story, and I let them know that you want to look at me and tell me, shut up, old man, you go right ahead, because that's what I said. But it will come in time. Again, the WWE is in good hands. Again, they're a great bunch of guys. So I'm not going to be the bitter old timer. I don't need to do a podcast and talk about wrestling. I've done it for 30 years. Thank you. I love chocolate chip cookies, but when I eat too many, I'm full. And the same as with the wrestling business. I've had a great time, but I will leave it to the younger generation. And like I said, I get kids to raise. That's a full-time job in and of itself.
Yeah, it sure is. Now, back to the movie, The Resurrection of Gavin Stone. And it comes out on the
January
20th, right?
20th, yes.
Easy
next
date to
Friday.
remember, the inauguration date.
Yes.
So any other movie projects on the horizon? Have you been booked to do another movie?
Well, I've actually done a small part in 2 other movies. I don't know when they're coming out. One is a spoof on the Avengers, called The Avengers of Justice, The Farce Wars. Which,
great.
Again, it made me chuckle, so I did it. And then a sequel of Pure Country 3. But I don't know. I just did those, and it's sort of a new world, again, that I thoroughly enjoy. I love the learning aspect of it. Yes, I guess to answer your question.
There are other movie projects on the horizon.
There are things out there that I've done, and obviously looking forward to doing more if the opportunity comes up.
So I got to ask you, The Rock, John Cena, is that the template? The guys who go into major movie careers.
Well, I think those guys. It's my understanding that that Rock had to go long beyond the WWE, and I think John the same way. I will admit, I guess whatever I sort of classified as an underachiever. My goal was to be a pro wrestler. My goal was to make it to the WWE. At about 28. I had to begin to dream larger than I had before. And at 51, I'm still doing the same thing. I'm on to a whole new learning of dreaming of an abundant life, of what more my life, because I've already done more than I ever possibly imagined. So on one hand, I think they're maybe the template for a younger generation. But for me, and I was before, I'm older than those guys. So for me, I was so fortunate. I lived mine, and I've gone beyond it. So I'm having to sort of come up with new stuff, which again that's okay with me too. It doesn't sound like a bad gig if you can get it.
But being on the set of a movie like this with the cast that we talked about, great ensemble cast. If it was me, that would make me feel like I'd been bitten by the acting bug. Did it affect you that way?
Oh, no, it did. Again, but it was the same way my first time, again, around the Wahoos and the Funks and the Flairs, again. But just like I did on this set, I went ahead and told everybody, look, this is huge for me. I'm very open and honest. I don't play any more of the games anymore of trying to pretend like I'm Mr. Secure. I let everybody know this is the neatest thing in the world to me. I'm a 51-year-old guy, but there is still a 12-year-old kid in here that sits here and goes, I cannot believe I'm doing what I'm doing. And I did it with Flair and them all those years ago when I met them, and I did the same thing on this set. I will be professional, but you need to know this is bigger than anything I ever possibly imagined. I'm a kid I'm a military kid from San Antonio, Texas. And I get that, like in the WWE and the wrestling world, again, they use all those big words. But at home, again, I walk around in a pair of gray boxers, and everybody goes, "Oh, you dad." There's a very normal, different life than the big wheeling dealing movie and WWE stuff. So I try to let everybody know that this is pretty neat for me, and I appreciate that I'm a part of it. Now that's out of the way. I'll be professional and I'll try to do my job well, but this is awesome.
Kids have a way of keeping people grounded. Okay, so last question for you. It's kind of not a trick one, but if you had 22 minutes to spend with somebody, in or out of the ring, doesn't matter, who might that be?
Now, so wrestling-wise?
It could be wrestling, it could be anybody.
Well, wrestling-wise, I think I'd probably say Gorgeous George. I mean, the way, just to go back, the originator of, him or Ray Stevens. They were guys that were just so ahead of their time, and absolutely nobody really, like, they say it, but they don't really know and appreciate, because of sort of the theatrics and the entertainment aspect that wrestling has gone to and has become so well known for. Those guys were doing it decades ago. And again, not on as big a stage because it wasn't so global, but they were doing it then. And to me, I'm in awe of that. And so again, they knew where it would go because they were doing it then. And so from that aspect, I'd have to say either Gorgeous George or Ray Stevens.
Well, Shawn Michaels, so nice spending 22 minutes with you. Thank you so much for coming in. And again, the movie, The Resurrection of Gavin Stone. See it, guys.